A number of complimentary plays coming up here for this Saturday college football card. Among them, Colorado hosting Arizona State. You know, last Friday when I cashed in with the top-rated 15-dime best bet on the Buffaloes over UCLA, the day afterwards I told you don't get that wrapped up about Colorado just because the Buffaloes walked to a 4-0 start because they haven't played anybody. This is truly going to be the big test for Colorado as Arizona State comes to town. Even though Arizona State is 0-2 on the road this year, this is going to be the best team Colorado has played, and this has been a one-sided series all in favor of the Sun Devils, so I'll break that game down for you. But first, guys, I want to talk about something that I think is overlooked when it comes to gambling. Now, listen, I always say that the golden rule of gambling is never bet more than you can afford to lose, because that way you always avoid the financial abyss from which there is no escape. But when you're gambling, it's always very important to remember bankroll allocation when it comes to betting no more than you can afford to lose. But as part of that, like a subchapter, it's this: always consider risk versus reward. It came into play for me yesterday. Georgia Tech, if you came to my site, I liked Georgia Tech yesterday. I can count on one hand the number of times I have made money involving Georgia Tech in college football. I can write a book with numerous chapters on how many times I have lost involving Georgia Tech in college football over the years. Just one of those teams that I'm telling you, if I had bet on Georgia Tech last night as a 5.5 to 6 point favorite at Louisville, instead of winning by 142 points, they would have probably won by 4 and failed to cover. There are just some teams that have my number, and Georgia Tech is one of them. So I was originally thinking about coming out with a 15-dime play, just like New England on Thursday night with Georgia Tech last night. But I thought about my long-standing history with the Yellow Jackets, and then I looked at baseball. And I saw the Brewers out there on the run line at home getting $1.30 plus money against Colorado, a team that really just doesn't hit on the road. So I thought, hold it, risk versus reward. If you're a $100 player, I could have, in that instant, laid $165 to win $150 with a 15-dime wager, right? Equivalent 15-dime wager on Georgia Tech. Or instead, what I did was came out the equivalent of a 10-dime play, and for a 100-dime player, that was risking $100 to win $130 plus $1.30 on the run line on Milwaukee, and that's what I did. Now, did the Brewers have to score 3 late runs to get me that margin of victory for a 4-0 win? Yeah. But listen, nobody discounts that winning ticket because of the way the Brewers won. Risk versus reward. I laid out less money and won nearly as much. Instead of winning 150 and risking more money, I won 130 and risked less money. It's not an isolated case, because when you consider over the number of wagers you make over the course of the year, not just a season, not just a sport, the year, it really does factor in terms of the amount of money you take in terms of wins and losses. So always consider it risk versus reward. It especially is true in baseball, but it should factor into all your betting decisions. Now, thanks to the winners on the Patriots, and thank you, the Milwaukee Brewers, which continued just a phenomenal baseball season for me. I'm, again, very sad to see the baseball season come to an end here. Tonight, that puts me into the situation to come out with another top-rated 15-dime release. As a matter of fact, number 18 out of 25. I'm calling it my Midnight Madness release. It's the last game on the board. Can't get any later than Wyoming at Hawaii. It goes at midnight Eastern time as I go for winning day number 61 out of 95. You get it for half price off by using coupon code HALF, H-A-L-F. And the other big featured play, props going out to Shawn Michaels, followed last Sunday's 100-dime max wager winner in the NFL on Jacksonville, with Monday's winner, of course, on Kansas City, with Thursday's winner on New England, last night with his first 100-dime play in college football, as he had Georgia Tech. Today, his second 100-dime max wager release of the college football season, Liberty and New Mexico State. Just like all the other plays, you get it for over half price off by using coupon code Sean. The winningest football handicapper here at this site over the past 7 seasons has made $10 bettors, a little over $14,000. And all the other discounts and promo codes are over on the home page. So let's first talk about this game between Colorado and Arizona State at Folsom Field. The Buffaloes are a 2.5 point favorite. But listen, off to a 4-0 start. But as I told you after beating UCLA, They haven't played anybody. Beat Colorado State in their opener in Denver. Took care of business against Nebraska in a game in which they had to rally in Lincoln against a Nebraska team that's yet to win a game. They hammered New Hampshire, big deal. And then after a sluggish first half, they took care of business against UCLA 38-16. The record of the 4 opponents they have beaten, 1-16 straight up. Now, it is true, they have had an extra day to prepare for this game, and they have a dynamite offense. Their quarterback, junior Steven Montez, has already thrown for over 1,000 yards, completing a national best 75.8% of his passes, 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and they have a very strong ground game, courtesy of a Virginia Tech grad transfer, Trevon McMillan, who's averaging 7.3 yards a carry, have an outstanding receiver, and LaVisca Chenault, who has 38 catches already this season. The defense, though, has played well, granted, getting a lot of quarterback pressures, as opposed to last year when they couldn't even touch a quarterback if you gave them a free pass, but they haven't played anybody. But this Arizona State team, yes, 0-2 on the road, losing at Washington and San Diego State, but has played a far, far tougher schedule. And this has been a one-sided series. Remember last year, Arizona State rallied for the 41-30 win in Tempe and ran for 381 yards. And they also have a veteran quarterback as well, and Manny Wilkins Sr., who has thrown for over 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns and also can run the ball. And they've got a running back, Eno Benjamin, 595 yards rushing, ran for a school record 314 and last week's home win against Oregon State. Now, it is true that the home team has covered 5 straight in this series, and it is true that the Buffaloes are 3-0 against the spread against Division I teams this year. But Arizona State has won 8 of the last 9 games straight up in this series. I'll tell you what, I'm going to go with Colorado in this game. But this is not going to be a cakewalk. That is the reason why this line is 2.5 points. Of course, if it goes up to 3, you absolutely, or 3.5, you absolutely buy down the half point. This is going to be, I think, a very tough game. Arizona State's defense is going to bring it. Colorado, it's not going to be a cakewalk. I can see this being a 24-20, 27-24 game right there, right around the number, a much lower scoring game than I think anyone anticipates. But I will go with Colorado and give the Buffaloes the benefit of the doubt and take them in this particular game. On the early card, a game that goes at 12:20 Eastern Time, I'm going to go with Syracuse, minus the 3 to 3.5 points at Pittsburgh. Naturally, I'm going to buy down the half point here. This is a Pittsburgh team that's 7-15 against the spread their last 22 games at home. This is a Pittsburgh team that got demolished 45-14 at Central Florida. And think about the up-tempo offense that Central Florida runs. It just wore down this Pitt defense. Syracuse plays the same up-tempo style offensively. They're going to do the same thing. Now, it is true that Pittsburgh is coming off a very physically draining game at Clemson. But this Syracuse team is for real. Look at what they did to Florida State 2 weeks ago at home. And that Clemson game, they should have, could have, and would have won, but they didn't. And that was their first loss of the season. I know Pittsburgh has won 7 straight at home in this series straight up. But listen, Syracuse won 27-24 at home last year. Syracuse is 5-0 against the spread this season. Syracuse has covered 7 of their last 8 on the road. And the bottom line is this Syracuse team is better. And they're playing well defensively because they've been able to generate a good pass rush. And this Pittsburgh team hasn't shown me anything defensively. Orange, meanwhile, they have scored at least 30 points in every single game until being limited to 23 points by a very good Clemson defense in Death Valley, which is nothing to be ashamed of. Also keep this in mind. Pittsburgh plays a very similar defensive scheme to the one that Florida State played 2 weeks ago that Syracuse simply had no problem with at the Carrier Dome. So that's why I like Syracuse in that game. Another interesting game. You got Miami of Florida taking on Florida State. Willie Taggart, welcome to the game. You have to start winning, and pretty damn soon. Mark Richt, the Miami coach, was in the same situation last year, and of course, he ended a 7-game Miami of Florida losing streak in this series. Well, today at Hard Rock Stadium, the Hurricanes have won 12 in a row there in regular season play, but Miami has not beaten Florida State at home in 14 years. Hard to believe. That's 6 consecutive home losses. Of course, the 14-point number, almost 14, that's the biggest number that the Hurricanes have laid at home in this series, oh my God, in almost 20-some years. Last 4 meetings have all been decided by 4 points or less, but has Willie Taggart's Seminoles shown you anything this season? Miami of Florida, I don't know what to make of this team. I mean, you've got a redshirt freshman quarterback who's going to play his biggest, or let's put it this way, his first big game of his career in Perry, who is completing almost 67% of his passes and 7 touchdowns, 3 interceptions in 4 games. You have a Florida State offensive line who has 2 big linemen who are both playing, if they play, at less than 100%. You have a Florida State running game that, well, it's non-existent. You have a Florida team who struggled in its opener defensively against LSU, but since then the defense has really been tuning it up. I mean, now they're playing like the defense of a year ago. 60 tackles for losses so far this season. That's 12 per game. That's leading the country. You know, Florida State is last in the ACC and 122nd among 129 FBS teams in the nation in terms of tackles for loss allowed, at almost 9 per game. And you got a Miami of Florida team that gets into that backfield constantly creating tackles for loss. That's a recipe, I think, for disaster, especially when you have a Miami of Florida team, a Florida State team that isn't able to run the ball. So I'm willing to lay the points with Miami of Florida in this contest. But of the 3 free plays, Colorado would be number 1, Syracuse would be number 2. Miami of Florida would be a distant number 3 in terms of the point spread, and that's the main reason why. That'll do it. Wish you well. Talk to you again tomorrow.